Hello, dear listeners. If you're new here, we're Margin Mavens, and we are obsessed with writing in our books and sharing our thoughts with you guys. In this episode, we are talking about The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. We finally get to our boy Percy Jackson again, and man, is he having a rough time. He's been plucked away from his life, dropped in the middle of a mess, and he has to pick up the pieces of his memories as he goes.
Can we talk about Hera for a second?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Never had beef with a god so much. And I met Ares.
Let's talk about how Hera, her favorite, Jason Grace, gets dropped
in a school bus.
In this cool bus with this hot girl, and just like,
he's got a friend.
He's got all sorts of friends. He has guidance. He's got all this other stuff. And then Percy's
running around the woods.
Running around the woods, being chased by, what, harpies, I think?
Yeah.
Being chased by harpies, who, by the way, not harpies.
Mm-hmm. No.
I don't remember what.
It was a
Gorgon? Not harpies. Gorgons, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Either way, they don't die. Because, as we've established,
doors of death are open.
Doors of death are open. So whatever dies is coming back, right?
Here's my thing.
She's got a lot to answer for, okay? She has a lot to answer for.
Here is my thing. I saw something on TikTok, I think, and they were like, "Oh, they just dropped them in like in each other's lives, like how they started, right?" And I'm like, "No."
No.
Percy, when we meet him, is a bullied little 12-year-old. Has Grover. Right? But Grover's lying and keeping secrets from him.
Right.
Percy didn't have a girlfriend. Like...
Tell him.
And so, here's my thing. This book was a lot of just me loving being back with Percy and hearing his sarcasm again and hearing his wit and all of those things. Because even without his memories, Percy was interesting. Jason really... He grows on me throughout this series. But he deserved, I think, a better introduction than what we got.
Like, the loss of the memories affected Jason far more than it affected Percy for some reason. And I'm not sure if that was Hera's way of, like, throwing Percy a bone or something. I think,
here's my thing, though, is...
But Jason, it's real aggravating.
Jason, when he was dropped in, right, he had that time to, like, get his memories back. By, like, being at the camp and, like, all of these things and going on a quest, Percy, by the time he awakens, like, Hera literally pointed out, like, I had him sleeping for a bit.
Yeah.
Because she views him as a loose cannon.
Yes.
Right? Which is really annoying. Because you can't call the person that you're banking on to save the day a loose cannon.
She's not wrong, though. She's not wrong.
We dislike Hera in this household.
We do, but she wasn't wrong. A broken clock is right twice a day. Okay?
Not unless you hit it with a hammer.
Percy is not as disciplined.
But that's because he's a Greek. She can't blame him.
Like you can't just do
it. But that's the painting that they paint. They're like, oh. The Romans are a lot more efficient. They're a lot more disciplined. They do things by rules. They have, like, ways and limitations, right? But the Hera...
And the Greeks go by vibes. I know.
It makes sense because the Hera that we're dealing with is Juno.
Yes. Yes, but also, you can't tell me that Percy wouldn't have found a way back to Camp Half-Blood. Like, he would have figured it out if he was not kept dozing. He would have blown everything up before Juno had a chance to get Jason.
Maybe that's what she deserves. Okay. First thing I wrote down from this book. Percy didn't remember the fact that he did the whole Achilles thing. Right?
Correct.
Rick seems more comfortable writing Percy, which I think is why his POVs are obviously more interesting to me. Because it just feels more like Rick has found the flow again in terms of this series. Right? Like, I have not read any of other books by Rick. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how his flow works in characters that aren't Percy-centric in the slightest. Right? But when it comes to, like, Jason versus Percy, And I don't know, like, once again, I don't know the timeline of when, if these books came out and then the Egyptian and the other ones came out, or like, I don't know when the Riordan verse started growing, right? But Jason read to me like his first dip writing another main character, if that makes sense. And so Jason takes a while to grow on me. Percy losing the Mark of Achilles was a bummer, especially knowing everything he goes through later. Right?
Hera, it's interesting that he had to give it up in order to...
Hera really hates him.
Yeah, I mean...
Because in my brain, right, if I know that I'm banking on these two guys forming a great army to save the world again, I'm gonna allow this man to keep the Mark of Achilles.
Here we go. Here we go.
You know, like, it just feels like she's self-sabotaging her own team. And that's weird to me. When we get to New Rome, random nerd alert that I had was Rick makes a point of saying that there's a little ghost boy chasing a ghost dog, right? There's a story that I read in middle school that was literally the premise of it, and both of those characters died in Pompeii. So my headcanon is those are them. I love that Percy remembers two things. Annabeth and his hatred of Ares.
Yes.
Mars shows up and he's like...
But, wait, hold on. We're not just going to skip right past the fact that he was ready to throw down against Juno once he realized who she was.
Yeah.
He carried her ass into the camp, across the river, and then as soon as he realized who she was, he was about to use the river and beat her down. And she's like, wait. She's like, wait. I have things I have to tell you. Wait.
Yeah. So I love that he sees Mars, right? And Mars is the patron god of New Rome. Yeah. So they're all super revered towards him and stuff. And he's like, no. I kind of hate this guy. And they're like, Percy, be nice to him. And he's like, no. I think I fought this guy him. I think I won. Like, this guy ain't nothing. Okay. Ella and Tyson are really cute.
Oh, Ella is a harpy.
So,
Ella is a harpy.
Let's back up a little bit. Percy meets Raina.
Percy gets a quest.
Who's the praetor. Meets her again, really. Because we find out that he blew up her home. No biggie. In Sea of Monsters. Because she was one of the handmaidens for Circe.
Yep, correct.
And so she holds a grudge against him. He has no idea who she is.
Right.
And once he starts getting that memory, he's like, wait, but she turned me into a guinea pig. Like,
yeah.
It's not like I did it unprovoked. I saw this island and went, yeah, that one. And so Raina and Jace were both like the head counselors.
Yeah.
And if we're using like Camp Half-Blood terms. And Jason obviously has gone missing. We find out that Raina had a good little crushy crush on Jason. She kind of viewed them as inevitable, right? Bummer for her because we know that there's Piper now and yada yada.
Right.
We meet Octavian. He massacres Stuffies, and so we automatically don't like him.
He really lives up to some of his flippin' namesakes, because I don't think there's ever been an Octavian in history who's been likable. And I appreciate that parallel.
So he is kind of like the prophet.
Oracle.
Yeah, he's like the oracle. He sees prophecies, yada yada. But allegedly. He's also very power hungry. And
he's a piece of poop.
And so he wants to be the other half of Raina's title, right?
Correct.
And Raina's worried because he has that like charm. He has the ability to make people believe that he's the right guy. And she's like, no. This guy kind of sucks, everyone. So Mars, like I said, shows up and issues them a quest. And Octavian is like, hey, but we need a quest that like sounds like a quest. And Mars is like, go to Alaska. Don't die, idiots. Like, he keeps it very short and sweet. So they find out they need to go to Alaska. We meet really interesting characters. So we meet Frank,
And Hazel.
And Hazel.
I love them both so much.
And Hazel is a daughter of Hades or Pluto. And Frank is the daughter of Mars or Ares. Daughter.
Son.
You know what I meant.
I was gonna let it roll.
Yeah. But he's also got like a really interesting lineage to him. He isn't just the son of Mars. He's got like other things going on.
He's got some Neptune in him.
He's got some Neptune in him. He's got the ability to like change into animals.
He has a really big crush on Hazel.
And she has a really big crush on him. And so they play a game of like capture the flag. Now, anybody who has been following Percy's journey knows that he's really freaking good at this game. And he gets put into the fifth cohort, which in like Greek standards would have been like Hermes camp or Hermes cabin in terms of like no one really takes them that seriously. They kind of just catch everybody, yada, yada.
Right.
During this game of capture the flag, Percy obviously does really well, but Frank takes charge really well and they get the flag. They win, right? The game is over. Gwen is stabbed.
Yeah.
And Reyna, I think, really shines in this moment because she very quickly clocks the fact that it wasn't just part of the games. Like, she's like, wait, that spear stabbed her in the back, and it also looks as though it was probably somebody from her own cohort.
Yes.
So she clocks that, and so Gwen is dying, right? And I forgot the whole Doors of Death
Doors
thing.
of Death, yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
as you do.
As you do, because it's not relevant in the sentence by sentence thing. But Gwen ends up not dying, right?
Because
and
the Doors of Death are open.
Yeah, and so she comes back, and she immediately does the smart thing. And she's like, I've done my 10 years. I'm good. Let me go. Yeah. Let me go to college.
I'm gonna go retire. I'm gonna bounce, y'all. Godspeed, y'all. But I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, and so it kind of starts planting the seeds of there's a traitor among them, but they're not really sure who. Like, we as the audience kind of have an idea. Yeah, we got the idea that it's some sort of like, stuffed animal murderer. I love that his introduction with Percy has a stuffed animal that he grabbed.
Yes.
And has been like his stuffy this entire time. He's like, this thing has been on journeys with me or whatever. And Octavian is like, wow, that's a great one. Yeek.
Yeah.
And Percy's like, wait. And so they get issued that quest where they need to go to Alaska because they need to defeat this giant, right? And that is, Alaska's a really bad place for demigods because it's beyond the reach of the gods, and so they're not really able to get help. They also know that the fifth cohort led an expedition there at one point, and they lost the like eagle, the Legion's
Standard.
eagle. Yeah. And
which, if you're an ancient Roman history nerd, that you understand the concept of that. If you don't, Google is free, please.
Yeah, essentially, we'll give the Steph notes for a second. It's a it's an item that was meant to bestow great power upon the Roman army or the Roman
the teachers coming out.
Yeah, and it was meant to be like a specific. Each group had a different standard, and if you lost that standard, you thought like you would lose the battles, yada yada yada. So the camp loses this standard. Mind you, this camp is the oldest, right? Because this specific camp was the descendants of the people from original Rome that when everything started happening, they like smuggled everything out and, yada yada. Those were the Steph notes. Anyway, so the standard gets stolen or lost. And they're like, okay, if they go to Alaska, maybe they can get it back. And Percy's like, I just started having dreams of my satyr friend. Yeah. And he says to stay put. So now I'm in a moral conundrum. He's also having a really hard time because the satyrs in New Rome are like homeless people. Like they just kind of beg for money and like I don't know why that choice was made. I would have to dive into like Roman myths to find out why. But it was a choice that was made. And so Frank becomes the head counselor of his cohort. Or,
Praetor?
No.
Well, not Praetor.
He becomes someone.
General?
And, sure.
And Centurion.
So, yeah. And so he ends up leading the quest. And so it ends up being him, Percy, and Hazel. And they go off. They do their quest things, right? And
What a wild quest.
Yeah, it's a doozy. Okay, at one point they're fighting grass.
Yeah.
The wheat really was
Wheat and barley were going, going through it.
We meet Iris, the goddess, and she's just a hippie little free-loving spirit, right? Which makes sense. She's in charge of rainbows and stuff, like in charge of other things too. But I liked seeing her. Her store was kind of funny. They end up back at Frank's grandmother's house, and that is where he finally. That's where he finally kind of like pieces things together, which I felt her exasperation as a teacher. Like I felt that deep in my soul. Because she was like, we have literally been
giving
telling
you all the answers. You know the answer.
I have literally spent your entire life explaining to you who you are, what you can do, all of these things, and you still do not get it. And so we find out that he's able to transform into things. She is dying, right? And so there's a bunch of big giants out and about. No, they're like
Lastragonians?
Yeah. And they're waiting for Percy.
No, they're waiting for Frank.
Oh, true.
They're waiting for Frank, but they want to take Percy.
Yes, they're running to kill Frank, but take Percy. And they manage to get out, and Grandma turns into some sort of animal. And
bird?
Yeah, and unsure if she like clawed some eyes out or if she did that as her last like power thing and then she died. So they make it to Alaska. We find out more and more about Hazel's past. So she was a girl whose mother, we're seeing some connections. The dots are connecting, right? Her mother wanted more from Pluto, wanted to be a queen, wanted to have money.
She wanted to be rich.
All of these things. And Pluto was
valid.
Yeah. Pluto was like, hey, you're kind of falling into Gaia's trap here. She's like, no, you just don't want to help. You don't care about us, yada, yada, yada. She's prepping to basically sacrifice Hazel to rise Gaia. And instead, she ends up sacrificing herself, but Hazel ends up stopping the rise of Gaia. And then Hazel...
What's his face?
Stops the rise of someone. And
her son.
Yeah, and Hazel dies as a result. And when the doors of death were opened, Nico sees her because he's searching for Bianca. We find out that Bianca has chosen to be reincarnated to hope that she can do it again and ends up to get to Elysium. So he won't see her again. And then finds out that that's also his sister. And he goes, hey, you also deserve another chance. He really sucks when we first see him in this book because he calls Hazel by Bianca or is about to. And
he's also like, what, 13?
I think he's older by this point. Not so much older, but he's been dealing with this for a bit.
Percy's what?
16, 17?
16, 17.
So he's probably like 14.
Still a kid.
Yeah.
Still a poor, traumatized, tortured
But
kid.
So is Hazel. And I think that really hits her.
That gets overlooked a lot.
That gets overlooked of like how much that probably hurt her and how much that lingers with her. You know? And so he is seemingly the only Greek that is aware of what's going on because he kind of just travels anywhere he wants.
Right.
And
he does what he wants. He doesn't care. So he knew immediately that who Percy was, obviously. And Percy is like, you know me. And he's like, no, I don't. No, I don't.
That's so weird. And so they go off on this quest.
Hazel clocks it too, though.
Yeah. He's like,
Hazel clocks it too real quick.
Well, Nico doesn't have a good poker face, but I think it's also just because he doesn't deal with humans often. Like, he's used to dealing with the dead.
The company of the dead.
So they go to Alaska and they're fighting this giant, right? Which Percy in this scene is so cool to me because you're seeing it really from the point of view of Frank. And so you get to see Percy like in his full
In
effect.
action,
Like,
yes.
yeah, because when he's
Without
doing it,
Percy's inner monologue of
'cause
like,
his
oh yeah,
monologue
I
is like,
just
I did this and then I did
shrug
this.
him off
and
and
whatever.
and
Frank is
Frank
like,
meanwhile
he
is like,
created a hurricane.
hurricane? Like he's a hurricane? It's Hurricane Percy just taking on all these monsters.
And so that was really cool. Backing us up a second, we end up meeting a seer who really sucks. Forgot his name. Where the harpies were cursed to only take his food.
Yeah. Yep.
And he
don't remember his name, don't care for his name.
Yeah, he starts working with Gaia. And he gets the magical invention of a weed whacker. He's using this to fight off the harpies. And so the harpies are starving. But there's a little one named Ella.
We love Ella.
And I've loved Ella's ever since Ella Enchanted. One of my favorite movies of all time. We love Ella. She is an interesting little harpy because she's smart. She spends all of her time reading books, and she's got like this eidetic memory, so she remembers everything she's ever read. Yeah. Lo and behold, we find out the reason she is wanted is because she has read the Prophecy of the Seven in its entirety, and she remembers it.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but that means that she had read it from these like important books, the Sibylline books that the Romans have been looking for forever. And so we find out that is why she is wanted.
Yes.
And she's cute. I like her. I like that she helps them.
She's just cute and honest.
Yeah,
like she's like, oh, Hazel, how'd she put it?
Done.
Yeah. Or no, Frank, go too. Like,
yeah.
She's like, no, you both gotta go.
Yeah.
And Percy's like, blackout, what?
And I like that she, when seeing the like Amazons, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're like, she's like, pointy spears, bad, we go? And I love her. And so when we meet the Amazons, because we're jumping around a little bit, but that's kind of the vibes when it comes to a Percy Jackson review, because it's a reread.
There's a lot.
So it's
a lot.
But so they meet the Amazons, right?
Yep.
And Raina's sister, Hela is queen, but we find out that the first ever Amazon queen
came back courtesy
of Gaia, and she's like, I'm gonna challenge Hela to be queen again. And Hila's like,
every
okay,
day.
but she won't die, which means she'll just keep coming back and she won't be tired because she's just dead already. Hela and Hazel have a really good moment, and Hazel ends up getting her horse, and this horse, his name is like Arian. What's the horse's name? Horse is really cool. Super fast.
Oh, please.
And this horse becomes really handy because they end up getting to Alaska very quickly, and it's really nice because the horse only eats gemstones and minerals, which is obviously what Hazel can.
The horse loves gold.
Which, who doesn't, you know? And so they basically make a promise that they're going to get back to the camp, help the camp, and Hela will survive at least long enough for the doors of death to actually be closed, because they need to go and save Thanatos, who is the god of death, right? Because everyone assumes that Hades is the god of death, but he is simply the god of the underworld and riches and jewels and stuff.
Yeah,
and Thanatos is the actual
god of death. Yes, he is responsible for the doors of death,
and apparently is gorgeous.
He's a looker, which if you played the Hades game, you already know that he's a looker.
Yeah. And so
we're totally normal over here, y'all.
Yeah, we get to Alaska and we find out that I think it's Polybots, ? No. Who's the one in Alaska?
You gotta make me look it up.
Well, they fought a lot of giants in this book, okay?
They did.
Freaking Gaia's son is there, and they fight, right? And it ends up being Frank. So Percy, this is the moment when Percy's acting as a hurricane, right? And then Frank is like, okay, well, we can't defeat him if he's in Alaska. And Percy does a really cool thing that freaks Frank out a lot and basically breaks the like glacier that they're on with the standard and falls, right? And Frank is like, okay, well, I have to make sure that like that was worth it. And so they drag this giant just far enough out of Alaska.
Yes.
So that he can now be killed.
He's in Canada, by the way.
He's in Canada.
He gets dragged to Canada.
Welcome to Canada, idiot. And Percy, by this point, has his memories back.
Yes.
And so when they make it back to camp, because after that they get the standard, you know, they get the Imperial Gold, make it back to camp because their horse is really fast. And once they get there, everything is not looking great. And Percy has a moment of freak out because he says if Camp Jupiter was in such bad trouble, he can only guess what Camp Half-Blood must be facing without him. And I put, he knows that he is that guy, which I respect. Because there's very few moments where Percy is just confident. That I also love that when he got his memory back, he immediately called Sally.
Yes.
Because he is a mama's boy. And he's like, she obviously is going to be freaking out because no way did Annabeth not call her yet.
Oh, no, Sally would have figured out almost immediately that something was wrong. Like, that mother instinct would have kicked in, and she would have been like, there was a disturbance in the forest.
Yeah.
And now my son is missing.
And so Percy obviously can talk to horses, right? And Arion has a potty mouth. And so Percy, we only really see his side of things, right? And so Percy is constantly like, I've been like sent to detention for less. Like, I'm going to put soap in your horse's mouth in a second. And it was just really good little moments of comedic relief that we needed. So Percy remembers that he needs to have a god to help him to kill the giant, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
So,
at the end.
and so he goes to Terminus, right? And Percy's like, hey, yo, bruh, I need your help. And Terminus is like, no, I don't do that. Right? And so Percy ends up going over, basically getting it to where Polybots is going to destroy the city. And so Terminus gets involved. And that is how they kill him. But what I liked was Percy starts finally getting a little bit of his swagger back when he's talking to Polybots. And he's like, you, me, to the finish. And I'm like, this kid is 16 years old. Right?
Yeah.
And it's such a 16-year-old thing to do of being like,
really
hey, we're in the middle of this thing. But alas, at the end of the fight, Percy is lifted up to be Praetor, which, what a flex, you know? Because here's my thing. And this really shows the difference between like Rick's favorite and Hera's favorite. Because Hera kind of puts Jason in like in a fuzzier situation at the beginning. Right? But he just becomes like head counselor because there's nobody else in the Zeus cabin.
Correct.
Percy becomes Praetor, which is something that the entire Legion has to basically agree to. So Rick really just does not hide the fact that Percy is that guy. And so they get a message from Mr. Leo Valdez saying, hey, we're coming in hot. Please don't shoot us down. And so Percy has to go to Reyna. And he's like, listen, there's going to be a battleship showing up. I need you to trust that they're not here to attack us. And Hazel and Frank have a moment with Percy where they're like, we understand if you need to go. And he's like, guys, like, you are my crew now.
Right.
Like, we have bonded. And so they go, the story ends with Percy saying, like, let's go meet my other family. And
we also talk about Hazel's reaction to seeing Leo.
Oh, yeah, because Hazel had a little boyfriend.
Had a little boyfriend named Sammy. And so Leo, when she sees Leo, the spitting image of Sammy Valdez.
Yeah, and that's a tough one.
That's going to be interesting.
So
in the next...
we get more into that. We know one of my favorite scenes is in this next book. Because it's when Annabeth sees Percy.
Yeah.
Her reaction to seeing Percy is just chef's kiss. Percy and Reyna have a really interesting conversation in this one because she basically says, like, hey, like, because you're Praetor, when you come back, maybe, like, I could be a really good friend to you. And he's like, she put just enough insinuation into friend for me to realize. And he's very good because he goes, I have a girlfriend. Don't know much about her.
She exists.
But she exists. So, like, ladies, people, really, your partner has no excuse. And
Correct.
So we know that in this next book, the forces are going to come together. We get told that they need to go to old Rome because things are happening, you know? And so the next book is Mark of Athena. I know that these 2 books were really good, but I do know that I love the ending, like the last 3 books of the series so much.
I'll be curious to see what my favorite is again, because I don't think I ever really pegged it the first read through.
I'm just such a Percy Jackson girly. Anyways, this has been another episode of Margin Mavens. We hope you appreciated this one, just like we appreciate you. We hope to see you in the next one.